Meeting for Tuesday, February 11th. Please call the roll.
Mr. Cappers.
I'm here.
Mr. Emery.
Here.
Mrs. Westfall.
Here.
Okay, we have the minutes of our January 7th meeting. I wasn't in attendance. If you guys have reviewed those, if they're acceptable, please adopt the motion.
Motion to accept on January 11th.
I'll second that.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, they're accepted. The reports. Mr. Drake, good afternoon to you. Do you have anything to add to your report, sir?
Just on the report, one of the biggest items you saw there on the work order report section was the tornado cleanup efforts.
Right.
And I just want to thank all of our staff, our first responders for the night of, and then my staff that came in that night, and then the weeks following. They did an excellent job and are already actually wrapped up with the majority of all of that work, and we're back on track with our normal winter work. So they just did an excellent job. It's really tough working in those conditions, and they just did really, really well and performed, and just want to thank all of them.
Good.
Yeah, it was amazing how fast everything got cleaned up.
For
It
sure.
was
Yeah.
a lot of work.
I was in a dental chair down in Sanibel Island, Florida.
I feel sorry for you.
And the dentist comes in and says, "Where are you from?" "Troy, Ohio." She says, "Didn't they have a tornado there?" And this was down in Florida.
Yeah.
It was a tornado. It was a tornado, but it wasn't a big one, but still.
Yeah,
Made national news.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Jeremy?
That'll be it.
Mr. Seiler, good afternoon. Do you have anything to add to your report?
Nothing in my report. I'll address a couple items under new business.
Okay, very good. Kyler's not here, and I don't have any report from Planning Commission. So let's talk about those new business items. First of all, from the field use agreements.
Yeah, so we've revised the field use agreement for facility users of our athletic fields, as we typically do every year or two, review them and make revisions. This particular revision, it's just the addition of the back portion of the facility use policy related to lightning detection system that we're working with Jeremy on with the contractor to install a lightning detection system at Duke Park, which is obviously our most used facility. And we intend to have that project completed. We're targeting April the 1st. We're waiting on the definitive timeline from the contractor. And so this information will be obviously distributed to all of our outside user groups, as well as our coaches that are coaching within our own program. And this is an agreement that they'll have to agree to and sign off on, that they have been made aware of this particular policy. So this is just in addition to the current facility use agreement. No fees or anything else are changing as part of the use of our facility.
So are you saying the only change to it is page 14, this little word here on lightning detection policy?
Yeah.
Is there a separate policy then for lightning detection?
No, it's just in addition to, it's pages 12, 13, and 14.
Oh, I see. Okay, gotcha. Okay. Because I know we spent a lot of time on the rest of the agreement when it first came out.
Yes, we did.
Okay. So do you want our approval of this? Is that what you want?
The Recreation Board has already approved this at their last meeting, and this particular policy was initially approved by both boards.
Right. Okay, question. Do you need time to review that?
No.
Are you okay?
No,
Okay.
no.
I'll entertain a motion then.
I'll make a motion to approve the addition of the lightning detention policy.
I'll second that.
Okay. Is that satisfactory, Mr. Seiler? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and then we have the Treasure Island use agreement for the concert events. Are you also undertaking that discussion?
Yes, so we'll have, at this point, we have planned 3 concert events at Treasure Island Park this summer. The one on June 26th will be in conjunction with GOBA, Great Ohio Bicycle Adventure event that will be coming to Troy. The second one will be held on July 4th, which will be part of, or sponsored by the Troy Area Chamber and the Troy Rotary. And then the third one is just one that we're doing on our own, that we've done for the last several summers since Treasure Island Park opened. These particular events here, the only one that we will be having the sale of adult beverages will be on August the 1st, and due to that particular date will need to be presented to council for their approval.
And the reason this is coming to us is because they're required city services of some sort?
You just have to recommend to council that they approve the sale of alcohol during that particular concert, because it's at a city park.
Okay, but we've got June 26th and July 4th here also.
We're not selling at those particular dates.
Okay, but if those were the only 2 dates, they wouldn't even have to come to us if they're not requiring city
That is
services,
correct.
right? Okay. Okay. Any questions of Mr. Seiler?
No.
You want to take action?
I'll make a motion to approve the sale of alcohol on August 1st.
And I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Cappers?
Yes.
Mr. Emmerich?
Yes.
Mrs. Westfall?
Yes.
Next on the agenda is we have a indication that the Robinson Fund, Pat and Tom Robinson, generously donated $10,000 to allow the city to purchase approximately 65 new trees. Jeremy, would you like to talk about that at all?
Sure, yeah, so we know that we have approximately 35 trees that we have had a hand in helping take down the rest of the way, or were already blown over from the storm. And these are all trees that will be on public property. So we plan to replace the 35, and most of those were on the levee, kind of near Community Park, the corner of Staunton and North Market, and then in Rose Hill Cemetery. So we know we'll replace those first, and then we had a number of trees like in the Southwest Historic District, Drury Lane, Grant Street, kind of in that area, that will be street trees, again, public property in the right-of-way. But we're working on finalizing the locations for those replants now, and then we'll move forward with actually taking on the planting of each of those trees. So the 65 trees is an approximation based on $150 value per tree, subject to the sourcing that's available and inventories that are available here locally to source those trees. So we're still working on that, but should be right in that 65 range or so.
Great. Well, I don't think we need to take any action to accept the gift, but Abby, if you'd make sure a thank you note on behalf of the park board would go out to the Robinson Fund for their donation.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, next, review and consider recommending to Troy City Council the approval and transfer of some property out of Campbell Park and Hook Park to the City Board of Education. Mr. Timmington, did you want to talk about that?
Good afternoon. So you have a report in your packet. I'm going to read the recommendation to you. We're asking that the park board recommend to council the ball fields and parks at Hook School and Cookson be transferred to the Troy City Schools Board of Education with the understanding that the Troy Board of Education will establish new ball fields at locations yet to be determined. So just to clarify that, when I say locations yet to be determined, they have the sites in place. They have renderings that are included in your packet of roughly where the ball fields would be. The reason that we put locations yet to be determined is because those renderings have not been finalized into detailed plans. We know, I don't know if, I think it's one of these properties, there's a water line that runs through the property. So as part of the final design of the project, where the building actually goes, where the water line gets moved, so that the exact locations of those ball fields are not known and can't be known at this time. That does not mean that while the renderings show that Cookson East Elementary School and the North Middle School, as you see in your drawings, that those sites are going to change. It just may be where the ball fields are on those sites. What we are recommending is, as part of this project, our sensitivity and knowing your sensitivity, the fact that we would be losing 4 ball fields, we want to make sure that those ball fields are replaced. In this case, in this proposal, that at least that amount would be replaced and restored, if not more. There are a couple of other locations, which is why I included the overall renderings. There are a couple of other sites where there'd be 2 more ball fields or I should clarify, backstops that could be installed as part of the school's project that would actually enhance the number and add to the number of ball fields with minimal, creating of infields to go along with those backstops, so that we could go from 4, replace those 4, and then possibly add 2 more. Our recommendation is, in fact, if you make the motion to the council, that the condition be that they will at least replace what's lost and possibly increase.
Mr. Titterington, you and I have been dealing with this for some time, and this is a severe departure from what we believe the intention was of the parties. There was supposed to have been a trade of park property for Board of Education assets, and I don't see any trade here. There was, the agreement that I understood.
Thank you for clarifying, because yours and my understanding were slightly different. So one of the options that was on the table, early on, before any of these renderings and when we were dealing with different variations, at different points, with different plans, different proposals, one of the options could have been a trade had the abandoned sites lent themselves to putting new ball fields on and creating green space. And a lot of that conversation happened before the schools, and I apologize, Superintendent Chris Piper, as well as Board President Tom Kleps, are in the audience and can, of course, speak for themselves. A lot of that was done, and the discussions were started prior to finalizing this proposal, and even getting the final verdict, if you will, on the surveys that they were doing, where they came up with this hybrid plan, neighborhood versus consolidated complex, where they had went from 7 or 8 sites down to the 4 or 5 that we're talking about now. So a lot of those conversations predated that, or were kind of running complementary to everything else that was going on. So that was only one of the options that were there. When they looked at the final plan and they saw that with the land that they had available that they could accommodate ball fields, the benefit to us, I think we'd all agree, is maintenance may be reduced from our standpoint as far as parkland that we have to maintain, and we could see benefit from more ball fields, which if you recall, we've just had a couple of Duke Park levies not go so well. We know that there is a demand for ball field space, particularly at the smaller age level, and so this plan offers that opportunity.
The plan also changes things, that we lose control of our neighborhood parks, the 2 in particular. If we wanted to improve those with playground equipment or additional ball fields or a soccer field or something like that, we would have no control. Plus, there's no assurance that the Board of Education will continue to use those as ball fields and not parking lots or anything like that, because we lose control of the property. It would seem to me that we're not in a position yet to recommend this to council until such time as there's a definitive agreement as to what happens. And I'm still looking for the trade of the properties. That was on, you say it was an option. Yeah, it was the primary option. The primary option was the trade of Haywood and Kyle in exchange for these neighborhood parks. And I don't see any reason to deviate from that.
Well, and I will say that you mentioned Haywood. No, the cost to demolish and then redevelop as ball fields is quite a bit. I don't want to quote a number. I'm sure the schools can. And as far as losing control, a condition that can be placed on this, certainly, especially since one of the properties that has a rendering including at least a backstop is outside of Troy and would require a use agreement. A condition could be use agreement for all of these facilities so that we can balance the control issues.
I'm just speaking for myself here, but What I'm anticipating is some sort of definitive agreement between the Board of Park Commissioners and City Board of Education indicating that upon the condition of the passing of the levy, and after, that we'll go ahead and transfer title to the properties in question so they can construct their buildings. And then in exchange for that, they will, after the buildings are constructed, that they will go ahead and demolish the 2 buildings and take care of any environmental problems those buildings may have, and then also go ahead and leave it in final grade and seating. And that's what I'm looking for. That's what the agreement was, or I thought the agreement was to start out with.
That was, again, that was one of the options that was discussed.
That was
not the.
That's what got me.
Well, that was your primary, I get it.
That's what got me to the table.
I understand, you're a
So you
participant in the
don't want to lose
conversations as
control
well.
Yeah.
of the land,
Right.
but we're not losing any ball fields, and the kids are still going to be able to use these fields, and I don't understand why that control.
Can I ask the
We're
superintendent
losing ball
to come up?
fields to the extent if they stay ball fields, but we don't have any control over that.
But they're saying they're going to make ball fields here.
That's today. They used to say that they were going to go ahead and give us a couple other sites too. But now they're not.
So you don't believe what they're saying, is what you're saying?
I believe what I see in writing. Agreed with
Well,
the parties.
and I get that, and we can put it in writing, and that's why that would be a condition, and council wouldn't exercise the legislation without those conditions having been met, because council does have to be the final authority on this legislatively. And so by you putting those conditions on, that does hold that over everybody's head to get it done before the transfer can occur. Can I ask Chris to come up?
Yes, if Mr. Piper would like to address the board again.
Hi, everybody. Chris Piper, Superintendent for Troy City Schools. So one of the things that I learned in coming here to Troy is that we have a great working relationship with the city, between the school district and the board of the park board. I think there's a history here of showing that great cooperation. I believe it's true that the Haywood, the ball fields across from Haywood, were at one point the school district's property. I believe that's the case.
I don't know.
And the city school district, do you know if that's true? I believe that's true. So the 2 ball fields near Haywood, for example, belong to the school district, but those were turned over to the park board to operate as parks. So we have a history of cooperation here. When it comes to the 3 sites being Van Cleve, Kyle, and Haywood, we're trying to be good partners with the community, between the city, between the park board, and we all have the same goal of providing recreational spaces to specifically our kids, but especially our whole community. That's still our intention to do that. We're trying to work with the city to see if there are options that make sense for the community, for those other sites. I don't know if that's going to pan out. And if it doesn't pan out, those buildings are going to come down and become green space. But we're just trying to work with all parties to make sure that the spaces are used appropriately. We know the ballpark's an issue. We get that, which is why we add them to our sites. So I understand that it's not what we talked about once before because plans are fluid, but it's our intention to make sure that all facilities and sites are good community use, especially for kids. Are there specific questions I can help answer?
And when this item was first addressed, I think you'll remember, Chris, that I said that we are a community, and I was very anxious to go ahead and cooperate in the school
Sure.
board's plan. But it seems like we're giving something up and not getting anything in return. Just a thought. Either one of you have any questions for Mr. Piper?
So we talked about the condition option, right? Is if we put the condition on there, how the property's gonna be used, what the amount of ball fields are on there, that would kind of suffice what's coming out and what's coming back, right? I mean,
And meeting the community expectation to keep some of these schools in their communities, as opposed, I can see if it had all gone to one site, that would happen, but, I mean, they're using these spaces and they're replacing the ball fields. I don't have a problem with it.
is contingent upon, obviously, the levy passing then? I mean, if it doesn't, yeah, so, yeah, it's be contingent, yeah,
Yeah, definitely. We're optimistic, by the way.
yeah.
We'll see.
Yes, absolutely.
You won't be fine. I believe we still need to take a look at the other option that was on the table. And if that's still the option, I think the Board of Education should come forward and say that that's what's going to end up happening. That'll provide us with a lot more green space in the city too, once those buildings are down.
So, thank you, Mr. Piper. when we talk about the surplus properties, as Chris mentioned, green space is one option, given some of the properties that might be surplus. We've also been looking at them, one or two of them is along the riverfront, in the riverfront downtown corridor. And if there are opportunities to redevelop those in some of the strategic ways that we want to have them redeveloped, and save funds that otherwise would be used for demolition and/or environmental cleanup, those options are out there as well. I don't have, well, I guess we do. We've got about 8.25 acres that we're talking about between Cookson and Hook. Not sure, I don't believe Kyle is that size. I'm not sure what acreage that is. I don't have that in front of me. But, you know, there may be some mix of things that we can do between, you know, I'm not sure if Kyle is interested. Who's that? It's not me, is it? Is it Siri again? Okay. I'm not sure, depending on the property, how much interest and attraction there might be through the CIC with the developer to be able to reuse that property or those one or more of those properties. But we've had numerous conversations that, you know, whichever way makes sense to dispose of the properties without automatically demolishing all the buildings. As Chris said, you know, we're exploring all of those, and we continue to explore those. It's a longer-term process. It's made easier when we can interject the CIC, because then we don't have as many hoops and red tape to go through. So all of that is being considered.
And if CIC comes into play, you're talking about years.
No. Why?
Aren't you talking about years down the pike?
No, not necessarily. The CIC is a mechanism that, you know, one option, one scenario could be that the schools transfer the property to the CIC through this city council, and then the CIC can act as more of a private developer and not have to go through as many hoops as they otherwise
It doesn't give any
would.
property back to the park commissioners.
It can, if that is how we dispose of a piece of property. The CIC can play into that as well. They have a lot more discretion without having to go to formal bidding, for example, without doing all the advertising, without having the time frames that otherwise you would have to have if this was just a government disposal or redevelopment of a piece of property.
I just see too many questions that are unanswered here yet, that need to be agreed to. Okay, thank you. Does anybody want to take any action? You can take an action to make the recommendation, not make the recommendation, table the matter for further consideration. What do you want to do?
I personally don't have a problem with it. You obviously do. So if you feel like you need to table it, then we can table it. I don't have a problem with it.
I am, you know, I think that adding the conditions to it, I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but it does sound like that you're a little deeper into this than what we've had some access to or have
Right. We're new
researched.
to it.
So,
And I'll
We're
explain
new
the
to
reason
it.
to that. The reason to that is if the two of us attend these meetings, then we have a public meeting.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
That's the
Right.
problem.
yeah.
Right.
So, I mean,
Okay.
understanding that.
And you obviously don't want to give up any parkland for any reason. And I don't have a problem with giving up some parkland.
And I don't have any problem giving up some parkland as long as we get something in return. You know, something that I believe is probably much more valuable than what is offered. So, okay, I will move the table it until our next meeting
Okay.
for the purpose of further investigating the agreement between the Board of Education and the Board of Park Commissioners.
I can second that.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The matter's tabled. Mr. Piper, if you and the Board of Education want to get back together again concerning this matter, please don't hesitate to contact us. Okay, thank you. Okay, next, Troy High School softball coach Scott Beeler requesting permission to build a storage shed at North Markham Street Field. Sir?
Sir, how are you?
Okay.
Good.
You are Mr. Beeler?
I'm sorry?
Are you Mr. Beeler?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
I do have extra copies of what I'm going to talk about if you need them, but I think Jeremy is giving you. And it's, I noticed in the minutes that it says to build. This would be purchased, already built, and just placed on the site. So there wouldn't have to be any building going on, it would just be placed there. Part of the request, I know that when we had come and asked if we could get a new scoreboard, the scoreboard became property of the city. What we ask with this is, since it is movable, that we would still retain ownership of it if for some reason in the future we would want to move it to school property for some reason. We would ask that this would only be used for high school softball. Part of the reason we want this is so that we can keep our equipment separate from the recreational department. I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble, but we have had some of our game balls come up missing. This may be 5 total over the past 2 or 3 years. It's not a lot, but, we just want to make it so that our equipment
Sure.
isn't used by.
I'm taking a look at your possible shed placement options, number 1 and number 2.
Yes, sir.
Have you zeroed in on one or the two second?
Um,
Either one of them?
The way that we see it is whatever you feel is the best location, even if you don't like these two, we're willing to put it wherever the city or the park board would like for it to be. So,
Ken, in your programs, do you have any input on that?
I don't think it impacts us either way.
Okay, Jeremy?
Just a couple of things. I don't have any preference to placement at all. One would be if Troy softball did retain the right to the shed, I would ask that stipulation be put in for ongoing maintenance of the shed, so that we're not maintaining a shed
Right.
that you guys are going to
Yeah.
retain ownership of.
yes.
And then also that we have wording in there that we contact the Jeff Montz with the water plant. Since we are in a wellhead protection area there, we need to be sure that they know. And then like storage of paints and any kind of chemicals and so forth would be restricted.
There wouldn't be anything. like
Right,
that.
but-
Chalk would be.
Yeah.
For lining the field, we'd go down it.
Sure, but we still need to do that on our end just to be sure he knows about it. And
Would you make that
that's-
contact, or would you require them?
I can do that. Yeah, we did that for the shed that we put at the barn in the park for Troy Civic Theater, so it's common practice.
And there's to be no advertising on the shed, is that correct?
I would assume that it would follow the city's sign ordinance, so, yeah,
Okay.
which I would love to see changed, but
I understand. Any questions of Mr. Beeler?
No.
Thank you, sir.
thank you. The other thing that we ask, since we are getting funding from the Troy Foundation for this, we need a written letter of approval from the city saying that we're allowed to put it there so that they will give us the funding.
How about a copy of minutes? Minutes.
I think when we did the scoreboard, I think there was an actual letter. I
I've
can't
drafted
remember.
letters before. I did that for baseball parents, so I can
We
do
can
that.
take care of that.
if you want to.
The only other thing that I would like to ask, and I forgot to get these to Jeremy, and I apologize. If it's possible to get electricity run to the dugout, the right field line or first base line dugout, it's only in the third base dugout. We do not have any in ours, which is on the first base line. We'd love to have, if we could just get the electric to the dugout, we'll take care of hiring an electrician to put in a light, put in a receptacle. We just need to get, we would love to be able to have a plug-in heater for the girls on days where we're playing in the snow. I know that sounds crazy, but we do. And the other thing is the access ramp. People use that as a ramp to get down, and we have had some elderly people fall coming down that ramp. If we could get a handrail put along the side there, or receive permission to put one in ourselves.
Jeremy, any thoughts on that stuff?
I have no problem with electric going to the dugout. We need to do some survey on our end to see the feasibility of that, how much trenching needs to be done, where that power would come from. If you're saying we just need to get power to it and then you would take care of having an electrician, I could contact our city electrician and see where we could get power from and get that to the dugout. For the handrail, I think that is a good idea. We don't have an actual handicap ramp there. I would prefer to give permission to build a rail. But yeah, I think that would be advisable and good to do.
Mrs. Knight, were you stretching or did you raise your hand for a point?
I would only ask that it was going to be retained by the schools, that the school insure the property, the structure, and provide us with a certificate of insurance on an annual basis, since it won't be covered by our insurance then.
It would probably be our softball parents that would take care of that, so we can see what we can do to come up with something like that. We already have insurance for our junior high program that we do. There may be a way that we can get that under there. The storage shed itself is only worth about $3,000, anywhere from, I think it's maybe $3,100. So, I don't even know if, from our standpoint, it would be worth carrying insurance on. But, yeah, I would.
Carry for contents?
Yeah, they would have to. It's really not our responsibility anyway. Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay, let me see if I can craft a motion. I would move that we grant permission for the Softball Parents Association of Troy High School to build or place a storage shed at the North Market Street field at a location approved by our superintendent of parks, and that they being the Softball Parents Association, retain the maintenance responsibilities for that. That we would then contact the wellhead, the water department to let them know of the placement of the shed, and that the association also be given permission to erect some sort of handrail going down and up the ramp, and that they provide a certificate of insurance for insurance of the shed and its contents to the city, insuring the city from any liability. I think that covers it.
Electricity?
Please?
Electricity.
Oh, and that we look into taking electricity down to the shed, that they would then improve the dugout, the dugout, that they would then go ahead and take it from there. Thank you, Abby. And that's the motion.
I'll second that.
Second. Okay, any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Cappers?
Yes.
Mr. Emmer?
Yes.
Mrs. Wetzel?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Okay, who's taking on the discussion concerning approval of the bike path connector through the community park?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
So you had the diagram, I believe, in your package
Yes.
showing the proposed path.
Right.
So we've recognized the need to provide the connector from the Adams Street section that goes up along, now goes into the cemetery and on up past the junior high and over the overpass. So this connector will go into the park. It's in an effort to reduce pedestrian conflicts with the bicycles. It will also provide better access to a new Duke Park connector that we put in along Riverside going out to Duke Park, and just allow better connectivity to the existing bike path. What you'll notice in your drawing there, we've built the path or proposed the path to go in around and through existing trees, in between existing trees, so that we don't have to remove any trees that are already there. A lot of the trees that are between the wall and the existing parking lot, or the existing drive-through area of Community Park, a lot of those trees have already been removed. Some of those were ash trees that died from emerald ash borer. A couple were pine trees that had died. So there's only one tree there now that will stay, that's right along that little stretch. So very minimal impact to existing landscape for quite a benefit for bicyclists. The hope is that it could be completed by as early as the first part of June, so that it would be done before Strawberry Festival and definitely done before GOBA. Of course, that would be weather permitting, but that would be the goal if you're going to approve it.
I don't have any problem with it. I think that's an enhancement, as a matter of fact.
Yep,
I agree.
agree.
I hereby move to approve.
Yeah, I'll second.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Cappers?
Yes.
Mr. Emmerich?
Yes.
Mrs. Westphal?
Yes.
Okay, next on the agenda is consideration of 2020 listings of events in Crowdy Plaza and other park areas. Mrs. Knight, would you come forward, please? Would you like to discuss this with the board?
Thank you. What you have before you is a pretty comprehensive list of events coming up this year that may involve park property. Some actually will, some might be as we get the project or the event more developed. So we're asking, as we do every year, for the board to consider this list and provide the approval, including noting that there's going to be 3 movies at Treasure Island Park we don't have the dates for. We've been having movies partnering with the library. So if we could consider that those would be approved once the dates are worked out between the Recreation Department and the library, we would appreciate that. And I think, just as there may be the other things that are listed, that those would be considered approved, because we don't have the date for Pink Ribbon Girls yet. But that is an annual event, so that's what we're asking the board, is to approve this, noting that if there is something that comes up, and there very well might be, that's not on this list, we will come back before you.
I think this is one of these quality of life issues that the parks are good to be used for.
Yes.
And I would certainly suggest that we approve this, and I'll make a motion accordingly.
Yep, I'll second.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Cappers?
Yes.
Mr. Emmerich?
Yes.
Mrs. Westphal?
Yes.
Okay, who's going to update us on the T sign? Is that you also, Mrs. Knight?
I think that might be, under the circumstances. As you recall, the board did authorize us, the city, to accept bids or quotes for T signs for Miami Shores. There are signs there, they pretty outdated. So we received one proposal from Golf Graphics that took perhaps some exceptions to elements of the bid specifications. And through many weeks or months of discussions between Kyler and the law director and Golf Graphics, we've come up with the agreement, which you have, and the only things that are deviated right now from what we bid is what's highlighted. And that basically addresses the questions or concerns of Golf Graphics, but are also acceptable to the Director of Law. I would note that there are a couple of issues that are still outstanding, and in talking to Mr. Kerber before this meeting, he suggested that the board could perhaps consider approval of this as long as any other changes were basically followed what you have in front of you and or were acceptable to the Director of Law. Of course, Golf Graphics is very hopeful to have this approved soon so that they can start their advertising process and get the T-signs out before the golf season.
Any questions of Mrs. Knight? I know that you haven't seen this. It has been presented to us in the past. The yellow highlighted areas, I don't think are that objectionable to us. But do you have any questions of Mrs. Knight?
No.
Have you talked to Kyler? Is Kyler okay with it?
Kyler was in the meeting that we had just a couple of weeks ago, and he was fine with whatever was suggested that was acceptable to the Director of Law, assuring that we have all the protections that we need. Kyler is perfectly fine with it, I can tell you that much.
Okay, is the board want to take any action?
Motion to accept the signage agreement, T-sign.
In substantial conformance of what's before you or as is acceptable to the Director of Law.
That's what Susan said.
Yes. All of that.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Cappers?
Yes.
Mr. Emmerich?
Yes.
Mrs. Westphal?
Yes.
Is there one more item?
Well, I'm looking for, Okay, I thought Stan wanted me to bring something up, never mind.
Thank you. Mayor, did you have anything you wanted to bring to the commission's attention? Does the commission have anything else they want to discuss? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion?
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned.